Hi, this is Jeff Allen. I'm addressing a few different posts about that different people have posted. So I'm not going to address a single person, but several of them that I've seen, specifically about the International Literacy Day that took place a couple of weeks ago. And well, it's an annual thing that was set up for by the United Nations. And there's been, it's interesting, I've seen some posts that talk, it's literacy, it's more than reading and writing. It essentially starts with the reading and writing and the literacy aspects of literacy and education and all that around that. But it's some people say it's about connection, empowerment, and understanding one another. And and then it comes up, you can get to even about using software in a native language, in their native language, that will help with learning materials and yeah, like that, and it'll make a difference. And I want to bring this up because I've been involved pretty much all of my career over the past 40 years in a lot of it's been about language technologies and about literacy. Not all of it, but the majority of it has been. That's probably what I'm most known for. And I think back to the book chapter that I helped co-write in a book that was co-authored by. Let's see, I got to remember where I looked it up here. So uh, we've got it here. Yeah, the book chapter. It was in 1997. It got published, and we had started. I got involved in it probably 1992, from what I recall. And it was already there were already committees that were working on this and started. But it was in Andre Tabore Keller's and all, which Robert Page and all they were editors, called Vernacular Literacy Revisited. And one of the chapters I helped write, co-author, was social context conducive to the vernacularization of literacy. There are quite a few chapters in the book. It's by Oxford, in Oxford, Clarendon Press in Oxford. And as we were working on that, this is 30 years ago, right? And a lot of the specialists that were there, and I was an incoming, the expert. A lot of them had been around and were, already 10, 15 years older than I was at the time. And the things that we struggled with was, literacy, but I think this is before the electronic aspects of it, that I brought a lot of technology. Most of everyone is bringing technology into this, but a lot of them were working in a context where literacy was happening not over a period of several hundred years, like happened in Europe, let's say in Europe, or even in Asia, and those areas that, all of the Middle East, Asia, and Europe, let's say, because most of the Americas are imported languages, right? For that were had literacy and education. Most of the languages that are in the North America and the Americas in general are native language they're only spoken language and have become a certain number of linguists have been able to write them, but that's still ongoing work. But all these languages from these three continents I just mentioned have had a long history, several hundred to thousands of years of going through literacy, but it happened over several hundred years in general. But a lot of things that are happening in this whole vernacular literacy is coming up with languages that are going through the cycle much, much faster. It can happen in a couple of decades compared to hundreds and thousands of years, which makes it brings about new challenges and the difficulty of that. And not only that, they're happening right now in this, let's say, the past 30 to 40, 50 years, especially 1960s with all the colonized nations of Europe that were decolonized and became independent, mainly for the majority of them in Africa and the Caribbean and elsewhere, some of the Indian Ocean, and then also think of India. These cultures that went through colonization, decolonization, and independence, and tried to be separated from the mother country that would colonize them. And so it's about empowerment. It's about power. There's a lot of that, but it's about the struggle of power and dominance. And a lot of this comes into play with these languages. The other languages of Europe or these other countries didn't really have as much because they weren't. They were becoming powerful over, with battles and wars and all that kind of stuff over and power of kings and all that and emperors over, early on when there wasn't much communication, right? But now all these newer languages or these languages that are going through this cycle much faster are happening during the wave of the internet, right? I mean, we have an era of the internet. We have communication. We see things immediately. We can see what's happening in other countries immediately. We know what's going on. And these cultures and languages are going through the struggle in a case where they're in conflict, often with the other majority international languages, some of which I mentioned, or those come mainly from Europe in general, that are the United Nations 6 languages basically, or UNESCO's, and that is a different challenge because there's a whole issue of diglossia where there's 1 or 2 languages, high language, a low language in the country. You can have some languages that could have context like Switzerland. You got 4 to 5, 4 languages, but you have English on top of it that's even spoken, used more for certain context. You got this bilingualism or thing. French, Canada is really interesting because there's a lot of bilingualism in certain areas, but then it kind of going further west, it's less bilingual. But all this comes into, I've been thinking over the few years, and I've done a few video playlists about the Caribbean, Africa, Asia, and India for the challenge they've been going through with this literacy, vernacularization of literacy, and dealing with, did they, I think about Africa and I think about where we are with the colonization, decolonization, and where they are now, financially, economically, and are they better off now than they were before the colonization, right? Think about it too of the Indians, let's say the call them First Nations. Canada calls them First Nations, the Amber Indians in the North America, actually in even Central and South America too. Are they better off today after all of this effort of bringing Western world and education to them through literacy programs? I mean, it's really just a different way of looking at of education, right? School education. It's just literacy is mainly often with adults or usually literacy done for adults or for people of anyone from a culture that doesn't have an oral traditional language. So it's usually a tradition, non-written language. It's an oral traditional language. So children and adults in both contexts are going through that. But you can have literacy too of adults in cultures that have developed, education systems. And a lot of happens to with foreigners and all that. So the literacy usually talks about that. But the thing is that I'm seeing is that a lot of these cultures that I've worked with and these languages that are, let's call minority languages, there's a lot of different words for that. They have less power, less money, less influence, and the parents will now try to reject having it. They would rather have their children learn a major language to be more successful, which leads to brain drain and kids getting degree. They get their diplomas or they go to school if they go to school, and then they'll get degrees and they'll prefer to go to another major country in Europe or the North America or something, and then don't come back. That happens. And I've been really thinking about this, having fought for this for so long. Is that is this really helping? Is this really help? Is really education a universal? Is it a universal right? There's a lot of focus on this. Is it a universal right? And I'm not really sure if it is. I'm thinking here. I'm brainstorming. I'm not making claims, but I've seen. It's not like water and food, right? You got to have water, food, or you die. Now, having education, literacy, and going through some educational process where you get some kind of qualification to be able to read and write does give you access in general to a better job. Okay, that's what happens in general. It's not always does that, right? So kind of depends. You have to choose what you're going to do. But in these cultures, it can go to that. But the problem is that it leads people leaving and they don't stay. But are they really better off in general for all life in general? I'm not really sure. We brought Western ideas to them. We brought the need for education. We brought the need to read and write for a language that got by for thousands and thousands and thousands of years without having any need to read and write. And they can still continue today without needing to read or write. So this is where I'm thinking about this, of the value of that, importance of that. Why are we doing it? Right now, And I know I've done it for 35, 40 years, and I'm questioning the value of it in general because I think it's important to say that we need to extract out what are our values in certain countries, developed countries, or overdeveloped countries that have gone through the post education, the post literacy phases, and are now we focus on diplomas and all that stuff and having the degrees, comparing to want to have others doing the same thing, following the same footsteps, which creates other empowerment. Also creates jealousy. It creates all kinds of fights and fighting and all that. And you can see this in a lot of these people that do come from the different languages. They're not able to they're not able to in the whole jealousy thing. They're not able to access. They can access, but it causes other problems, and this can happen in general too. But so I think the really important thing here is to really think about is why are we supporting it? Why are we doing it? And it does have little steps, and I do believe it has in steps important. But I'm questioning are the reasons why you do this, right? And what is going to be the most important thing of the so I really, wondering as we're questioning this kind of thing, what is going to be the result? Is it just to help them get better jobs in another country, or is this really helping them economically today? That's all a big question. I think it's good to have a lot of debates about this because this is sometimes pointed, and the diversity and inclusion. I fully support it, but there are not always good results. There's not everything's always good for that. And I think about for the cultures, are we changing these cultures? For the whole Amerindian cultures in the North America and South America, Central and North America. But I really was looked at consider how they went through extermination, but they also died from a lot of sicknesses that brought here because of colonization, right? And now they're disempowered, and it's really hard to get them back to want to have the empowerment. They sometimes don't want it. They would rather stay invisible. And sometimes all the efforts you do into having big meetings, councils, and projects, and I work on the Native Alaskan computer assisted technology for Alaska Native languages, Katahdin project. In the end, they just didn't like the leaders really wanted to do it, right? So but there are opportunities for it too, and in my Microsoft research lecture in 2010, I highlighted that the way to get around this or to go ahead and push for literacy and vernacular literacy isn't trying to go through all the ministries of education in all the different countries, because that's a really slow process. Even 10, 20, 30 years, it's really slow. If you put the language into a software program that people use every day, then like Facebook or Microsoft Word or Excel, and you make their language available in the menus, that will bring literacy. But it brings other problems. How are you going to fund that, crowdsourcing, all that, and the quality of that and everything? And people disagree too, because there's so many different spelling systems for some languages. It's incredible. It's not just, we're used to having one spelling system. You have it right and wrong, right? And you say that's the right way to do it. A lot of these languages, Haitian Creole, there are 11 different orthographies, right? That are known, not including all the hybrids that have come out. So there's a lot of this that's involved, and it's quite a complex little matrix of things to think about. All about It's not just language; it's about power and how to deal with that and the struggle for that. And we as humans, we've been going through this for millennia. So so it's and now to do with that in the new context, and what are ways to do it that is favorable for these cultures that have been traditionally oral, and we have a loss of memory too. The one things that's really important to know is that because of education, I believe, and because of reading and writing, we've lost our memory, our power to memorize, our internal memory of human beings, because we're focusing now on phone numbers. I don't even know my girlfriend's phone number, right? I know her name, right, in the system. So it's these things that we've reduced our memory and memorization techniques, and if we're not working on it, we'll just become enslaved to fast ways of doing things. But we don't have the capacity to memorize as much as we used to. When we had storytellers and you memorize things and you heard it many, many times. I mean, look at the younger generation today. They don't want to listen to something twice. They just don't want to hear it. So they said, "Oh, I already know, I've already heard it," right? That's, you can see this tendencies to that. And this will happen with as we begin to have language, cultures that are going through this literacy. aspects and becoming, more educated, if I can say. So things to debate about, things to think about. I'm just bringing food thoughts to the table here to discuss and to think about. So I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but it's from this experience of having through this with a number of cultures that have struggled with this for over the past 40 years and longer than that. So thanks so much for listening.